Eternity is relentless, Raziel. When I first stole into this chamber centuries ago, I did not fathom the true power of knowledge. To know the future, Raziel. To see its paths and streams tracing out into the infinite. As a man, I could never contain such forbidden truths. But each of us is so much more than we once were. Do you not feel with all your soul how we have become like gods? And as such, are we not indivisible? As long as a single one of us stands, we are legion. Our futures are predestined. Mobius foretold mine eons ago. We each play out the parts fate has written for us. Free will is an illusion.
Albert Einstein once said that everything is determined, the beginning as well as the end, by forces over which we have no control. It is determined for the insect as well as for the star. Human beings, vegetables or cosmic dust, we all dance to an invisible tune, intoned in the distance by a mysterious player. Many of us would like to believe our choices control our fate, but what if our paths were laid out for us from the start? What if our decisions led to the same result, no matter what? In Legacy of Kain, fate is viewed as unchangeable because all creatures are compelled to follow preordained paths. The series takes place in a universe in which free will does not exist, and nearly everyone's destinies are predetermined. For this reason, no one in Nosgoth is truly free. They are in essence puppets, pulled along by invisible strings. But then, if everything that ever happened and ever will happen is set in stone, how do we explain the choice given to us, the players, at the end of the first game? In Blood Omen 1, the young vampire Kain is tasked by the former Balance Guardian Ariel to restore the pillars by murdering each of the corrupted guardians. When Kain fought and defeated the Death Guardian Mortanius and seemingly overcame the dark entity possessing him, Ariel appeared and revealed to Kain that he was in fact the last Guardian, having unwittingly taken her place at the moment of his birth. Through Kain's eyes we are offered a choice. Either we can restore the pillars and return the land to its natural, untarnished state by having Kain sacrifice himself, or we can refuse the sacrifice and have Kain rule as a tyrant over a broken and ruined Nosgoth. The choice is presented to us by two cards. The one on the right shows a lush green land full of abundance with clear blue skies, while the one on the left depicts a dark, barren desert littered with skulls. Each card represents a respective good and bad ending. However, in the grand scheme of events, it doesn't matter which ending we opt for. Our choice is irrelevant because the later sequels reveal that Kain rejected the sacrifice, eventually going on to become Nosgoth's ruling monarch. This is the canon ending for Blood Omen, and the only outcome that matters. While some may say Kain's fateful decision that day was freely made by him at his own discretion, I'd argue it was never really a choice to begin with. After everything he's been through, after all the lies, secrets and treachery, I don't believe for a second Kain would ever willingly take his own life. It's not in his character.
Gift? Vorador thought my curse a blessing. That we were gods. That mortals offered their blood as sacrifice so that we could enjoy our supernatural powers. And somewhere, deep inside my new self, I knew he was right. That mortal dreams were prayers. Prayers to us, begging us for power.
It is said that a man can do what he wants, but he cannot will what he wills. This line, first written by German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer and then later paraphrased by Einstein, essentially means that people are free to do whatever they desire, but they are not free to choose their own desires. I've spoken before about how in life, Kain was an ambitious man with little to no direction. I get the impression that when he was human, he was dissatisfied with the hand he was dealt, despite being of noble birth. When he became a vampire, however, he was suddenly given new purpose and excitement. It didn't take long for him to reap the rewards of his new dark existence. He revelled in the carnage he wrought, all the while developing an appetite for power. It was inevitable then that Kain would preserve his life at the cost of letting the pillars collapse. Within the context of the series, he is not free. He does what he wants and what he feels compelled to because it's in his nature. In Nosgoth, there are no real choices. There's only a straight line. The illusion of free will comes afterwards, when one looks back and sees the branches, the possibilities, and asks, what if? On a surface level, Blood Omen is an exciting hack-and-slash action adventure, but at its heart it's a literary game with thought-provoking dialogue. It's a story about a brooding, intelligent vampire who ultimately sacrifices the world in order to become king. If the first Blood Omen game was intended to grapple with themes of morality, propaganda and betrayal, then without a doubt, Amy Hennig's Soul Reaver series wrestles with fatalism and man's struggle for free will. At their core, the Soul Reaver games ask an interesting question. Can free will exist in a universe ruled by fate? In Soul Reaver 1, fate is described as a wheel. To put it simply, it is the inexorable cycle of birth, death and reincarnation, to which the living and dead are bound. The wheel of fate defines the path one must follow, and compels them to follow it utterly. When Kain's lieutenant, Raziel, was condemned to the abyss, he found himself in the lair of an ancient deity. This elder god argued that the existence of vampires trapped their souls within their corpses. As vampires were immortal, they were apparently excluded from the wheel.
The birth of one of Kain's abominations traps the essence of life. It is this soul that animates the corpse you lived in. And that, Raziel, is the demise of Nosgoth. There is no balance. The souls of the dead remain trapped. I cannot spin them in the wheel of fate. They cannot complete their destinies. Redeem yourself. Or if you prefer, avenge yourself. Settle your dispute with Kain. Destroy him and your brethren. Free their souls and let the wheel of fate churn again. Use your hatred to reave their souls. I can make it possible. Become my soul reaver, my angel of death.
From this scene, we can surmise the Elder God is an advocator of fate. Although the Elder was connected to the wheel, it didn't appear to have any power to alter individual destinies. In fact, it may have been bound by the same rules of predestination as every other being in Nosgoth. This explains why it resorted to trying to persuade Raziel into killing Kain and his vampire brethren, and why it threatens Kain when confronted at the end of the series. Nevertheless, the Elder benefited from souls being enslaved to inevitable futures, as the cycle of life, death and rebirth fed the Old One. Initially, Raziel was happy to oblige the Elder, as destroying the vampires tied in with his goal of revenge against the master who betrayed him. But later, Raziel would learn that the Elder wasn't being entirely truthful. According to Kain, the Wheel of Fate dictated the individual destinies of all creatures, immortal or otherwise. Vampires weren't excluded from the wheel. While their destinies had been prolonged in the material realm, they still lacked the freedom to act outside of fate. Only Raziel was exempt, due to his execution and remaking in the abyss. Only his actions could influence and steer the fates of others.
Listen to me. You must understand that every creature is bound to one predestined path. We are all shackled.
To the Wheel of Fate. Believe me, I know that even better than you do.
All but one. Because of your remaking, you are the one unbound creature, the one among us all that truly has free will. You have a choice, Raziel.
It's difficult to know for certain the full extent of Raziel's abnormal free will, as the series adheres to strict rules regarding causality and time. In Soul Reaver 2, Raziel pursues Kain back into the pre-Blood Omen era, where he discovers one cannot effortlessly alter the past. The continuum of history resists change. Even though Kain and Raziel are able to travel back through time, their mere presence and petty actions have no bearing on pre-established events. History says they first meet at the Pillars, and then later on in the Sarafan stronghold, because they were always meant to. Past, present, future, it's already been written. The only thing that is different is their perception of these events. However, there is an exception to the rule. When Raziel encounters Kain in William's chapel, the vampire was expecting to die here. It was fated to happen. But Kain had an ace up his sleeve, the Soul Reaver. If two incarnations of the blade meet, a temporal paradox is formed, a distortion in the fabric of time, powerful enough to reshuffle history. The sword had the ability to change time. Knowing this, Kain handed Raziel the blade, but urged his lieutenant to reject the force, the pull of history that was tugging at Raziel to kill him.
You have nothing to fear from me, Raziel. You hold all of the cards.
Then perhaps I should test your sincerity. If what you say is true, you should be terrified. I could kill you here and now.
And so you do, Raziel.
What's happening?
We're hurtling towards our destinies, Raziel. What you feel is the pull of history rushing to meet us. This is where history and destiny collide. If you truly believe in free will, Raziel, now is the time to prove it. Kill me now, and we both become pawns of history, dragged down the path of an artificial destiny. I was ordained to assume the role of Balance Guardian in Nosgoth, while you were destined to be its savior. But the map of my fate was redrawn by Mobius, and so in turn was yours.
This is madness!
Fight it, Raziel. This moment does not have to be an ending. It can become a prelude. I can't. You can, Raziel. Look inside and see that it is so. You have the power to reshape our inevitable futures. William.
What is this?
History abhors a paradox, Raziel. Even now, the time stream strains to divert itself, finding its old course blocked by your refusal to destroy me. The future is reshuffling itself to accommodate your monumental decision.
The paradoxical meeting of the physical Soul Reaver, together with the Wraith Blade, was enough to derail the timeline, sparing Kain. What's unclear is what freedom Raziel actually had to initiate the change. It seems he needed the Soul Reaver to shift events, but this alone didn't make Raziel special. After all, Kain had also unwittingly used the Soul Reaver paradox in Blood Omen when he fought William all those years ago. It appears anyone can change the past, so long as they're armed with the sword and cross paths with another version of it. So, what part did free will play in all of this then? In a universe so entrenched in inevitability, it appears Raziel, like everyone else, is limited by having to rely on an exception to bend the rules. Well, according to Legacy of Kain Defiance, it turns out the Reaver paradox was not necessary for Raziel to control his destiny. Although this is not clarified in the games, the paradoxes only seem necessary for momentous shifts to the timeline. If characters like Kain and Mobius are to be believed, then Raziel is the one creature in all of creation capable of exercising free will. His choices though are predictable, making them easy to manipulate by outside forces.
So, you prevented Raziel's soul from entering the Reaver. Do you believe for a moment that by this you have averted your fate? Or his? Or that of Nosgoth itself? Your manipulations are pathetic.
Yet Raziel retains his free will, and that's what frightens you, isn't it, Mobius? You cannot see his path, and so you cannot control it.
And neither can you. Yes, Raziel is shrouded from us, but we see the ripples of his potential actions, and every path he might choose leads to the same outcome. He will kill you, Kain. In sparing Raziel, you have written your own death sentence.
In my earlier video about the vampire and Hilden champions, I spoke of how Raziel fulfilled the roles of both champions of prophecy. The murals we come across in Defiance depict two legendary figures locked in battle. In some, the vampire hero was triumphant. In others, he was defeated by his rival. But the murals are not meant to represent the clash between Kain and Raziel at Avernus. Rather, they are intended to portray Raziel's sacrifice. As confirmed by director Amy Hennig following the release of Defiance, Raziel was both heroes all along, and Kain was neither. The vampires and their sworn enemy the Hilden interpreted Raziel's presence throughout history differently, as both races claimed him as their respective champion. Now, several people who commented on that video brought up an interesting point, that the champion prophecy is a reference to the coin metaphor Kain used in Soul Reaver 2.
30 years hence, I am presented with a dilemma. Let's call it a two-sided coin. If the coin falls one way, I sacrifice myself and thus restore the pillars. But as the last surviving vampire in Nosgoth, this would mean the annihilation of our species. Mobius made sure of that. If the coin lands on the reverse, I refuse the sacrifice and thus doom the pillars to an eternity of collapse. Either way, the game is rigged.
You said it yourself, Kain. There are only two sides to your coin.
Apparently so. But suppose you throw a coin enough times. Suppose one day it lands on its edge.
Ever since the dawn of time, people have wrestled with ethical dilemmas. Sometimes a person faces a decision so agonizing, the two apparent choices are terrible. In Legacy of Kain, the coin is an allegory for choice. While in this scene it's used to represent Kain's dilemma in the first Blood Omen, it can also be interpreted as the two sides of the champion prophecy. As both champions, Raziel is the coin personified. Indeed, Kain's very act of condemning Raziel into the abyss can be viewed as him throwing a coin and betting on the best possible outcome. The edge of the coin is the hope that Raziel will sow chaos, and with any luck, once the dust settles, a third option can be found. As the Hilden champion, Raziel is able to bring about their release, thereby endangering the existence of all other species in Nosgoth. But as the vampire messiah, he purifies the sign of balance, ensuring that the pillars are once more in vampire possession, and in so doing, he redeems himself. By being able to fulfill both prophecies, Raziel is capable of making the only choice that really matters. His sacrifice is what grants Kain the power to stand against the malevolent pretender god. Raziel is a strong symbol of free will. He does not like the idea that he may not be in control of his own life. His fear of one day being imprisoned in the Soul Reaver is part of his motivation for exercising his free will to try to avoid that terrible future. This, however, does not help him escape the clutches of inevitability, because he still gets consumed by the sword in the end. The Wraith blade affixed to his arm is proof that he can never escape the tragic outcome destiny has planned for him, but that doesn't mean he cannot affect the lives of those around him for the better.
Kain, do you so enjoy death?
Yes, Raziel. No!
Yes, this is how...
No! Raziel!
The Soul Reaver, pure of all corruption. This is what it is for. This is what I am for. The two become one. Both Soul Reavers together. And the sign of balance is healed. And I am not your enemy, not your destroyer. I am, as before, your right hand, your sword.
Ultimately, Raziel chooses to forgive Kain, not merely because it was fated. His selfless decision to sacrifice himself shows that he decided to live according to his own beliefs, regardless of whether it was prophesized or not. Raziel choosing to disregard his own existence for the betterment of the world emphasizes the significance of free will. He shows us that free will can exist in a reality dominated by insurmountable fate. And yet, not everything can be avoided. Sadly, some fates, like Raziel's, are inescapable. All things considered, I want to conclude this video by asking you to think about what role free will plays in our lives. Often it's easy to brush this question aside, as we tend to equate free will with the menial decision making we do. The fact of the matter is that many of our everyday choices usually lead us to the same place every night. For Einstein, imagination was the supreme redemption of human life from what he claimed to be the prison of determinism. As he once said, knowledge is limited, imagination encircles the world. Personally, I like to believe that our ability to take chances, make mistakes, and grow is the truest expression of our freedom. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the subject. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and if you want to join a growing community of passionate Legacy of Kain fans, consider subscribing. Until next time.